All right. So tonight, or rather at this point, the message is about mercy. Um, they're kind of like, we talk about the five offices, and they're kind of like five principal things. And we've been talking about different kind of like characteristics that are shared between different offices and so on. But they also carry their own individual kind of things. And almost like they don't have a monopoly on it per se, but it's like a specialty in essence. It's just it comes naturally to them. They don't have to learn it. And the one that I was kind of given to start off with was shepherds and just the gift of mercy that they have. I've talked before about how shepherds are kind of like they're the caretakers. In a lot of ways, they're the ones who create the home, who make the home a home. But mercy, the gift of mercy, it's a funny thing that you can see. Like, everybody can exhibit mercy. Like, that's not something that's in dispute. What it is, though, is that it just comes more naturally to them. So you can see people who, in the other offices, who might not be so able to show it. Apostles have a sort of infamy for being lacking compassion. Prophets can fall into this thing where they're kind of like they get black and white about it. So like they'll give somebody a word, and when the person doesn't listen and their whole world falls apart, the prophet is just kind of like, yeah, I told you so. I warned you. And you didn't listen, so you deserve this. Very kind of like a Jonah kind of thing. Evangelists, a lot of times they might not stick around. Teachers can, yeah, teachers can be pretty heartless sometimes. Like they'll see somebody suffering and they might tell them how they could have done it better. And that helps so much. And I know that at the end of the day, these are always gross generalities, but if you look around for it, it's actually not that hard to see like why they are the way they are. But shepherds, even shepherds who are in like absolute hate with the person they're involved with, when they see them suffering, they can't actually like stop themselves from wanting to help. Like they'll try. But I've watched this happen with a number of people who I know are shepherds, where what they do is they'll be in hate with this person, just like disgusted with them, frustrated with them, so angry at them, all this stuff, just trashing on them all as much as they can. And then they see the person like sick or homeless or in like need. The moment they start crying, it's over. The shepherds just you watch them just kind of melt, and they're just like, ah. Can I get you like some food, or can come here, I'll give you a hug, we can talk about this. They just can't help themselves because mercy's a part of who they are. And this is a thing that we kind of, even like, I'm out Jeremy for a minute because he has the same thing. Like, I've watched him be like this most spiteful human being at times. And then the moment that person gets really hurt, he's there for them.
Yeah, he is. The secret is like, gotta be like open to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes those people under his wing sometimes when he's called to give them a word, take care of them.
Yeah. It's just a funny thing. Like, we see it happen all the time, and the thing of it is, though, is like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but let's talk about mercy and why this matters, and also, where it relates to shepherds. Because, see, the thing about it is that with this thing, it's not necessarily meant to just be something that they carry. It's something that they're supposed to exemplify and help lead other people into. See, if all 5 offices have their own kind of thing, well, is it meant to be like just the thing of like, oh, okay, well, that's their specialty, they can worry about that? No, absolutely not. See, there's a kind of like blending together that's supposed to happen in leadership as we all kind of draw from each other, because one of the big things is that with each office, so when apostles learn mercy or accept mercy, when prophets become open to mercy, when teachers become open to mercy, when they start to like make that a part of who they are, and make isn't the right word, when it becomes a part of who they are,
yeah.
They bring a different facet of it. Like a shepherd wants to take care of people, but teachers can help. When they start showing mercy to people, they can actually help somebody like rebuild their life. Apostles showing mercy and can help somebody like really like strive and build and grow and just be renewed. Yeah. Evangelists can help them like find places, and like they can offer so much, and prophets can offer so much guidance as well. There's just they each bring their different kind of facets into the fold, and as mercy being the thing that pushes them forward and leads them to care for these people who need help. And that's the big thing about mercy. And like, even though we talk about like shepherds and like the way that it's just natural for them. Well, it's natural for them because it just comes from this place of seeing the hurt and the pain, and oftentimes they recognize that. They feel it. They feel it in their bones, and they can't help but respond to that. Because compassion is just as much a part of mercy as mercy is itself. And that's the thing that we run into with it. We talk about mercy, and this isn't something that you just do, okay? I mean, how do you teach mercy? We could sit here and talk about how you just have to sit back and remember that they're people too. But honestly, a lot of people don't remember that. A mental exercise can only get you so far, especially if you just decide you don't want to because you really don't like the person. It's just like...
I have never heard of such a thing.
There's this thing, though, about being open to the reality of what mercy looks like and how profoundly that touches people. When Jesus talks about mercy, his example of someone that was merciful was a Good Samaritan. We all know the story about the Good Samaritan. We have such a glowing response, and it's really funny because, like, for us in 2020 in America, we hear the term Good Samaritan. We're just like, yeah, I know what that's about. But when Jesus told the story, it had a very different connotation. It was more like, yeah, in Jewish culture, it was, well, the realism is that Jewish culture was, at that time especially, was pretty racist. The Samaritans were like these dirty crossbreeds who, were seen as just being despicable people. Not because of their actual like character necessarily, but just because of bloodlines and things like that. And maybe character. I don't really know that much about the Samaritans, I'll be fair. But the thing of it is that they just look at these people as just horrible. So when Jesus tells the story about the Good Samaritan, it's just the statement of, okay, mercy looked like this, guys. And this person who you all view as dirty and disgusting and horrible, because of his goodness, actually has a more significant place in heaven than the two teachers of the law and the people who you view as great and mighty and special and righteous. And as a result, they look down on this person that was broken and in the ditch. And that's the thing, is that the Good Samaritan had mercy on the person in the story who was lying in the ditch. I want you guys, like anybody watching this video, to stop for a moment and feel this. When have you been changed most? What has challenged you most to grow into new places, into new things, to change the way that you live? Has it been people like telling you what to do? Has it been people like crowding around you and dictating to you what is right? Has righteousness been the thing that like really made you a better person? Or has it been something else? See, the reason why we start with mercy is because it's one of the most profoundly effective things in changing a life. People touched by love, by merciful, generous kindness, it's world-changing. It's funny, actually, because today I was thinking about my past when I was a kid. I was always... I grew up, like my mom was doing Native American studies, and we went around to all these different reservations in Minnesota, and she would do like interviews with the natives, and different tribal elders, counselors, things like that, different people in the tribes, and my brother and I were left with the kids, which was great because white kids on a reservation are loved so much. So much.
You were just pampered.
Oh God, we were so pampered with fists and feet.
Oh, wait.
The thing is that like, when I think back to it, there's this question of like, do you remember the name of your bullies? And most people, when they're bullied, they usually have like one person who stands out. I don't remember the names of any of those kids. But I remember the ones who either became friends or the ones who were just genuinely nice kids. I remember that out of everybody that I met or fought with, I mean, to be fair, we actually didn't even learn the names of some of the damn people that we met. Like, we didn't know. We were introduced to whoever mom was talking to and told to go play. It was great. The thing is that, like, I remember that we were at a guy named Bim's house, or Biff. Biff was his name, was what he was referred to anyways. Maybe it was a nickname. Anyway, Biff was a nice guy, kind of an elder in the tribe. The 4 kids who decided to gang up on Matt and I in the driveway, on the other hand, were not so nice, and I don't remember any of their names. But I remember Antoine. He was a kid whose mom was interviewing. He didn't live on the reservation at all. He was actually out in Bemidji, tiny little, well, it's actually not that small anymore, but a city out in Minnesota. I remember Antoine really well because he surprised me with how nice he was. See, See, as a kid, I kind of existed under the perception that human beings were just kind of like the worst things. I spent all my time as a child wandering around looking for bugs and lizards and, well, not lizards, it was Minnesota. There's no such thing. At least in the north. I spent all my time looking for snakes and frogs and toads and turtles and, you know, whatever else I could find, because I found myself drawn to animals over people as a result of the fact that my interactions with people had been notedly poor. Every kid that I met, every male child had something to prove. And they just wanted to fight. I didn't like fighting. I wasn't going to lose if anybody tried, but I didn't like it. And every girl, every human female that I came into contact with was kind of pushy and self-righteous, and they didn't want to hang out or be friends. So they were all just terrible. And going into the reservations, I didn't see anything different. Like, Native kids were worse, and I understood why they were the way they were. You know, I got it from a very young age. They had so much injustice visited upon them by white people, and I was white. So, you know, I knew that they were projecting. And I never held it against them. However, I also didn't want to hang out with them. You know, even when we were there, I'd go wander around the frog pond. At Biff's house, I wandered around the frog pond looking for frogs and things like that. I was just going to go look for turtles. Really didn't want to have anything to do with those kids. Or any of those people. Not anybody. Until I met Antoine, and he kind of changed my world a little bit. Because he was just a really sweet, genuinely sweet kid. And he was older than me, which, you know, typically came with the expectation that I was going to be dismissed or blown off or something like that. But that's not what happened. Instead, he, like, invited Matt and I in, you know, was our friend. That's the thing, is that, like, I remember him because of that. And that's the thing, is, like, it was the beginning of a change in one facet or another. It challenged my perception. And that's the thing, is a lot of people in this world sit in places of having perceptions that override their ability to see clearly how other people are. I mean, I've made references before to, like, people who basically it's this. More people are accustomed to being put in states of conflict and defensiveness than they are at being able to be heard, being able to be understood, being able to be seen. I know more kids who are bullied than I know kids who are bullies. And even out of the few bullies that I know, and the funny thing is like, a lot of those people who were bullied actually have become bullies in their own ways. Like, it's a fascinating transformation that I've witnessed many times. And it's sad. But what it comes from, and this is important because it correlates to exactly what I'm trying to express here. They have had their world be shaped by their treatment, by the nurture that they were offered by that world. So these people who became bullies because they were bullied. And what they learned from those bullies was that in order to be powerful, you had to be able to punish the people around you, to lash out, to treat them like garbage. So in order to grow in their minds, they decided to grow by pursuing the same course of action that had been visited upon them. And this is something that you will find time and time again with people, is that their purview is limited by their interactions with the world around them. A lot of people come to believe that how they're supposed to live, how they're supposed to act, is dictated by those around them. A lot of Christians become... This isn't for... every time I have to put in COPPA, I have to put not for kids. A lot of Christians become pious dirtbags. And the reason being is because they're growing up, they're raised by people who are acting like pious dickbags. Okay, so if I grew up in a church and everybody's being hyper-judgmental, hyper-critical, they basically exist in a state of surveillance culture, which is horrible. And it's all based on the idea that they're keeping each other accountable or some other garbage. So you grow up in that. How do you think you're going to act? Well, in order to be a Christian, you're going to act like that. And then what's worse is you're going to preach that. You're going to teach that. You're going to illustrate that. And then when you eventually turn away from that, because nobody can actually maintain that for their whole lives. No one. I have never seen a single in 30 odd years of life, I've seen people turn away from that because they got tired of it, they couldn't handle it, they couldn't keep it up, or they got burned by it usually. And when they got burned by it, that's when they turn their back on the whole thing. And then when they come back to Jesus, they go back to it. And it's just like it's basically like going back to a bad ex-boyfriend or a bad ex-girlfriend. You know that they're going to treat you like garbage, but you missed them because you remembered all the good times while you were away. And you forgot about all the bad times, and loneliness is a pain. And the thing about it is that in all of this, you know, you watch these people do these things where they go through these cycles and they go back to these ways of thinking. And at the end of the day, it's because we're all very limited in our ability to perceive and think. Like, most of us are highly unimaginative. And it's sad. And the thing that we run into as a result of that is that we make terrible decisions, foolish mistakes, and we're just so horrifyingly pathetic in our own ways. And that's why mercy is such an important thing, because we all do this stuff. I'll be honest and say straight to anybody watching this video, from the group especially, none of you are exempt from this. I mean, I could go down the line and talk about individuals, but that wouldn't be appropriate, I'm told. So, I'll just say this: not one of you is exempt. And if you want to talk about that further, you can message me, and we will talk about it, and what I see, and where I see, like, repetitive things. You know, whether it's you're more like your family, like, whether it's that I've seen you act like your family in certain ways, or whether it's that I see you becoming the same kind of bully that you hate so much, or just so many different things. We all fumble and fall down. And that's the thing about the gospel, is that that's exactly what it talks about. Like, when Paul talks about it in Romans, he talks about how we've all done this. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And this is something that you'll find repeatedly stated. It's not even just Paul who writes that. in I believe it's First John chapter 2, John writes it. These guys understood this concept of like, okay, people are people, okay? And not one of you is above that. And at the end of the day, where mercy comes in and is so incredibly important is that it hits on that place. It says, yeah, okay, I can't help but see you as a person. I mean, the reason why shepherds respond to that is because they see a person suffering. It stops being, that dickbag Barry who stole my girlfriend and then left her after he got her pregnant, and then ran over my cat with his car. No, it's a person suffering. Now that he's broken down crying because, his mom died. It stops being about what they did and starts being about what's real and right now. And yeah, like a lot of people can jump up and say like, well, if you treat them nicely, they're never going to learn. Actually, that's the complete opposite. And the funny thing is that what fascinates me most is to watch people do exactly what was just stated. They're gonna punish them or cheat or teach them otherwise, and nothing happens. They just stay the same. They just gain a bigger chip on their shoulder and feel more justified as to why they should be acting the way that they're acting. Whoa, everyone picked on me kicked me when I was down, therefore I'm going to run over another cat and steal another guy's girlfriend. It's just baffling. It's almost like we read the Bible and we see what God taught, and we see what Jesus talks about, we see what God talks about, we see this whole concept of like love overcoming evil. Mercy triumphs over judgment is a statement pulled directly from the Bible. And yet we all look at this stuff and act like God doesn't know what he's doing. So we go about it our own way. And then as a result of that, we create a world where everybody's on the defensive all the time, and everybody's fighting with each other. And we think that we're making progress. We're so fucking stupid. And the thing that we run into is that as a result of that, we create this merciless circumstance where everybody's crying out and seeking justice, and nobody's finding it. At some point, somebody has to stop and say, okay, enough. Let's just stop here. Let's just come here. Let's just sit for a moment. Let's have a snack. Let's talk about it. At some point, somebody has to show a modicum of humanity towards somebody else and start bringing about mercy. And that's why shepherds are built the way they are, is because God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that that was going to need to happen. Because because those other four, left to their own devices, built going purely off of like their functionality, it can get ugly. And I don't say that as a statement of, oh, this is possible. No, I've been in those churches. I've been in those meetings. I've been in enough prophet huddles to know exactly how that goes. It ain't pretty. I mean, you ever sit in a room full of people who tell you like how you're on the way to doing something wrong, and then when you don't see it, then you crash and burn, and then all of them effectively cross their arms and tell you, well, you deserved it. I've been there. It's not a good feeling. I've also watched them do it to other people, and unfortunately I've been part of the team saying, you deserve that. So I've got all three of those sides, and none of them are good. None of them are good, man. Like, that's just reality. I'm not proud of that. And when I look back on it, I'm a little ashamed of the fact that I was so blind. Because the people involved didn't learn. What they did was they got hurt and they walked away. And then they just gave themselves over to a life that didn't actually involve any form of growth or anything like that. They just lived in pain. They left their group feeling like we were all monsters, and we were all a bunch of like self-righteous shitheads, and they weren't entirely wrong. And they ran away and they were hurt by it. And then they, just continue to live in that pain. I see some of those people sometimes still. The beauty of mercy is that it actually does have an effect. See, when people start treating people like people, start seeing people as people, and remove these kind of deluded views of, how things are supposed to be, and just kind of like help people be where they're at and be okay where they're at, well, then they might actually be able to grow from where they're at into those places that they're supposed to be. And that's where mercy is so important, is because we need that. We need it in our souls. We live in a world that doesn't value this. I mean, most people scoff at it. Mercy? Why? Why would I show mercy to these people who hurt me? Why would I show mercy to this person who I don't care about? Because they're another human being. Well, these people are against me. Look at all these liberal snowflakes, or look at all these I don't even remember what they call Republicans, but it's still like the other side is like,
about vegans.
oh, yeah. There's so many different angles to go with. I was thinking politics, but yeah. God. Right. Vegans, women that breastfeed in public. God, I remember watching somebody do a thing about cesarean sections. I gave birth to my baby like a real woman does, instead of like a pansy who gets a cesarean section. It's like, really? Really? Shouldn't you both just be glad that you had children? Like, you're both moms. This isn't actually conducive to anything. Like, we're not made for this. All these things where we're drawing lines in the sand and creating divisions between each other, and that's just foolish. That's not conducive to human development in any way, shape, or form. So mercy ends up being such a key thing, because, and not just for the people who are screwing up, but for the people who are judging them for screwing up. Mm-hmm. It works every which way, because everybody in that situation is screwing up. Nobody's right. I mean, it's just like when Jesus stood in front of that crowd of people, and he had this woman next to him who had been caught in bed committing adultery. She had been caught in the act of adultery. And now this crowd wanted to stone her to death. And Jesus' only response was, first he played in the sand for a minute, and then he looked up at them and was just like, okay, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And none of them could do it. Why? Well, it's obvious, because none of them are without sin. Nobody is. Nobody is completely pure and righteous. That doesn't exist. Even the people who are, like, who hold themselves to such an obsessive standard are usually a bunch of prideful jackasses anyways. I've been there. I remember a time when I was going to church, back before, like, I really, like, knew the Holy Spirit. Before God really was able to, like, talk to me. So everything that I lived was about existing in a state of, performance. So I kept all the commandments, I did all these things, and I got to a point where I realized that I couldn't actually remember actually sinning. Like, I'd sit there and think to myself, I'm like, what were my sins? I've kept all the commands that I know. Well, you know what happened with that, right? I became prideful. And I don't mean like I became prideful because I was thinking that I was free of sin or anything. No, that was an objective truth. Where I got prideful was the fact that I was so damn good. Like, so good. I didn't swear. I didn't look at porn. I didn't do anything bad. I was so good, and everybody needed to learn from me. Everybody. And everybody needed to listen to me when I talked because I was right. And I was their guiding light, and they needed to understand that. You would come against me? How dare you, you sinful piece of trash. I remember actually looking at, and Jeremy can actually verify this if he remembers. I remember looking at Jeremy dead in the eyes and telling him, I'm better. You need to listen to me because I'm better than you. And I said that with absolute conviction. And the worst part was that he agreed with me.
Oh.
It's just gross. And we're not meant to live there. Like, that was the kind of thing where, like, that was just pure pride. There was no compassion in that. Jeremy didn't grow from that. He didn't learn anything. All that he learned was that, well, rather, all that came from that, the fruit of that, was that, like, I got put on a pedestal, which doesn't actually help anybody grow. Either me or the person or the people putting me on the pedestal. It's just this thing, like, it's just bad, it's toxic. And no one grows from there. So the value of this is incredibly important. The opportunity to allow people to grow. Because it brings humanity to things. Both for all sides of it. There's mercy to be had on every person, because we're all in these states of, not being perfect. We're all messing up somehow, some way, somehow. And as a result, we need that. We need those people to come alongside us and just sit with us sometimes. To be our friends, to love us, to take care of us. And again, that's such a shepherd thing. And it's a place for the rest of us to grow and to learn. And there was a lot of time spent giving personal anecdotes and, like, validating this. And it's funny because the fact that mercy has to be validated is actually just a sad day for where we sit.
True.
So we'll put it down very simply. The need for mercy is significant because it is the biggest part of growth in the church. It is the biggest source of growth in the church. Because where people are met with mercy, they learn to know what it is to be loved. They know what it is to start being met with compassion. And yes, there are some people that are hard asses and they can just completely deride mercy. But eventually they too will have to be hit with these things because at some point everybody in the church, everybody in life runs into things that are hard. And they need people to come alongside them. And that's where they can learn that they can drop that armor. They can stop trying to defend themselves. They can stop trying to fight everybody. And they can just be. See, the thing about it is that like human development is crippled, encumbered by conflict. There are some people who learn from conflict. However, they need time after said conflict to grow from it, to learn from it, to think about it, to be in it. Nobody learns from the fight, necessarily. They might learn afterwards to, not say this or to not do that, but again, it's all afterwards. It's in reflection. On the other hand, with mercy, it's this thing where it just lets people breathe. And that's one of the biggest deals for us, is when we can breathe, we can think. And when we can think, we can learn. And when we can learn, we can grow. And each one of us are God's people. And we need that opportunity to grow. We don't learn that from all this other stuff that's going on. And that's where it's important for the shepherds to be able to come forward and lead us. And for us to learn from them. If you're a shepherd and you have that natural inclination to be merciful to people, great, do it. Be there, be that. And don't be careful about it. Be free with it. People need this, especially in this day and age. This whole series has been intended to kind of like help people, exist in who they are, but also to like move forward in these times of just calamity and chaos, because other people around you need that care and that love and those different things. Whether we're talking about the last message, which was about, these different offices and the way that they seek truth. Of course we need truth. We live in a culture with a manufactured divide between the right side and the left side of the political spectrum. There's so much misinformation. And the sad part is everybody who has that misinformation believes that they're right. Because that's exactly what they're intended to believe. And in all of these places, we just need people to show up and be merciful, to be peacemakers, to bring that. There's so many fire wars out there right now where nobody's listening and everybody's hurt. And they just keep doing it. Y'all just keep repeating the same stuff. I believe it was Gandhi who made the comment, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. There's wisdom in that statement. The man was a pacifist. He understood, and he had a reason for that. And what's funny about that pacifist is that we all remember his name because he actually made a significant impact on history. He didn't go around beating people up. He didn't go around trashing people. He didn't lash out. He was peaceful, he was humble, he was quiet, he tried, and his approach was gentle. Y'all think the only way that works is to hurt people. It's foolish. Anybody who's studied basic child development can tell you that that's foolish. And in these places, we need something else. And in the church of all places, we need something else. At the end of the day, it's that point in time where, especially for like a church like Refuge, we need people to start stepping forward and being more than this. Show some compassion, show some love, but more than anything, show some mercy. None of y'all have it all together, no matter how much you want to believe it. And where offices end up being convenient is that, they're able to, we have a few shepherds in our group. I mean, Sierra's another one. But they're able to just like make people feel welcome and at home, whether it's protected or comfortable or whatever. They always provide like that particular point that allows it to feel like a home, and that's super important. And it's also super important for us in our individual communities, like outside of this church, to be able to interact with people and create home, or at least be able to like offer some perspective of that. Like I said earlier on, every office, every person has the capacity for mercy, of course. And each office brings its own kind of like flavor to it. And in that particular vein, like once the shepherds start leading the way and we start seeing that, their interpretation and their ability to be merciful, and sometimes they need to like coach us. Because we're, if you've got, I think I talked last week about, in the last message, about how like Jeremy used to like coach me in like things that I would say in order to save me from like just tearing people apart.
Yeah, he was, what do you call it? He was PR.
He was doing PR, yeah. Very much so. Like, he was shepherding me in my behavior and in my words.
Yeah, helping you to connect to people.
Yeah, as opposed to cut them down without mercy. Yeah. Instead, it was being merciful. I remember we had a guy coming to group a couple of years ago, and oh my gosh, did he piss me off. He was so soft, and I just could not handle it. I needed to talk to him, but he couldn't talk. He wouldn't talk. He needed time away. It was just this whole like mess. I got to a point where I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm gonna go tear his ass apart, and if he leaves the church, I don't care. Jeremy was on me, like right on rice with that, because it was just like, nope. You need to learn to deal with these people because you're a church leader.
He inspired you by like reminding you who you are.
He reminded me of who I was
And that's mercy sometimes.
and thoroughly put me in my place, which I needed. Yeah. And the truth is that like, what Heather just said is incredibly valid. One of the most merciful things you can do sometimes is to remind somebody of who they are. I mean, how many times have I just said, like, over the course of this, humanizing things? If nothing else, reminding another human being that they're human can sometimes be the most merciful thing that they need. We need that. Like, we really do. Because sometimes we don't feel like it. And that works so many different ways. Yeah. Yeah. And that's effectively what I've got. It's just this thing, like, there's a new and better way. It's not even new. It's just better. And it doesn't have the immediate results, and more than anything, it doesn't have the immediate feeling of validation that comes with seeking justice or whatever, but God, it actually changes people, which at the end of the day is what we want. We don't really want to maintain this situation of we don't really want to maintain the situation of the constant conflict and warfare that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And if you do, then you actually don't have a place at this church. I'm just gonna be straightforward with what I'm hearing and being given to say. If you want war, go somewhere else to find it. This is a place for people to heal, and a place for mercy to actually exist and to settle. And if that's a part of things that you'd like to be, then you have a home here in our little group. But it's still a place for us to grow in, as much as anything else.